cool because it kind of looks like a not chenille. It kind of looks like a terry cloth or so. It kind of has like a fabric, like a cloth effect that's a little bit different than what you see with a typical embroidery.
Hello and welcome to the AOI Masterclasses for the Velocity series by Oracle Racing and Bybit. In this episode, we invite Erick Calderon, also known as Snowfro, the third artist on the lineup. Today we will dive into the creative and embroidery process behind /.
Hello and welcome to a new AOI Masterclass for the Velocity series. Today we have Erick Calderon, also known as Snowfro, amazing artist, and obviously the third artist of the lineup of the Velocity series. So very happy to have you, Erick. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. How are y'all doing?
Of course. And then we also have Kristen Stovlen, our second artist from the Velocity series. Hi, Perk. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I hope you're doing great too, and the others. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And then we also have Nick from Enosis, who's helped us with the amazing embroidery part of this project. Hi, Nick.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Let's start. Let's dive into this amazing project called / by Erick. So Erick, we know that you've been a fan of F1 motorsports in general for quite some time. So how did you feel when we first approached you with this project collaboration with Red Bull Racing?
Oh man, I mean, there was a lot of feelings when AOI first approached me. My first reaction, and I think I mentioned this in a message, my first reaction was like, I can't do another thing. I feel like pretty overwhelmed in the world of generative and crypto, but it's Formula One and it's Red Bull, and we watch every race like religiously, and I've been kind of tinkering and racing cars since I was a kid, and I don't know, it just like it kind of kept nagging at me. And then AOI was also a little persistent, which I thought was really great too. And eventually I was like, look, if we can do something that I've kind of been wanting to do for a long time that's never been done, or at least not that I know of, and at this scale, I'd be open to it. And so I talked to Mara, my wife, who was very helpful in like the initial understanding of embroidery, and she got really excited about the project, and we're like, all right, we'll do it. So yeah, we agreed to do it. I think it was like in May, maybe. I mean, it was plenty of time to get this thing done. But of course, in this space, everything just seems to be all about deadlines, and yeah, got it done. I was very excited to get it across the finish line.
So how has your passion for F1 kind of influenced your creative vision for this project? How did it all started for you? Where did you start from to kind of create your project?
Well, there's a lot here. I mean, for starters, the idea of a proof of concept is really interesting to me. The Chromie Squiggle was a proof of concept, and it was a way of demonstrating what you could do with the intersection of blockchain technology and generative art. And it was a very simple and minimal thing. And I'm a minimalist at heart, and very much guided by minimalist design ideas. And also there's this curiosity or this desire to solve problems in my mind. And so I've been tinkering with this idea of generative embroidery for a really long time. In fact, last year I had pitched Art Blocks to build infrastructure into the Art Block system for embroidery specifically, which luckily I work with some people that were just receptive to a crazy idea and willing to kind of build it out. And so we had built this concept out so that you could have a generative output that speaks directly to an embroidery machine, but it wasn't really put to use. And part of that is because it was actually quite and as Nick can probably talk about in a little bit, it was quite a bridge to gap the difference between the way that embroidery has worked for the last, because digital embroidery has existed for, so I mean, I think the original DST files were based around punch cards, if I'm not mistaken. Like, digital embroidery has existed for a really long time, and people are really kind of set in their ways and kind of stuck in the way that they do things. But in my mission of generative production or 101 of X production, that says that if you can make a million things that are the same for the same price, that you can make a million things that are all unique, all else held equal, I think that humans will tend to gravitate towards the thing that makes them unique, that makes them an individual. I saw this opportunity to kind of pull this together, and given that the Chromie Squiggle is such a simple, minimal mark, And embroidery has some limitations and keeps it simple and minimal. And then also just having been at racetracks for a lot of the last 25 years of my life, seeing the markers on the curves, you see kind of like the bumpy parts of the curves where it's like you see stripes of red and white, and you often see, the little arrows. I was like, I think I can turn this into like a very minimal thing, and then utilize some of the color theory that I've learned over the years to try to explain to an embroidery machine how to replicate unique outputs using the same structure, so like without retooling. So it was a lot of things. It was a drive to be minimalist, as most of the projects that I've released so far have been minimal, and most of the work that I released back when I was in the ceramic tile business, I was known for the more minimal designs, and we like to live in minimal settings, and so it just kind of felt right to kind of have that level of minimalism here, and then on top of that, building color ideas that can be embroidered in unique ways by the embroidery machine.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So you were talking about your inspiration from the tracks that you've been seeing over the years, right? So I think I wanted to touch on the different traits that this collection has. How did you choose this one specifically, and what do they all mean?
Well, so there's 5 major traits, and they're roughly based on the amount of time that a car spends in each of those modes on the track. And so the one that's the least common in terms of the main types is the grid. And the cars are really only on the grid for a limited amount of time at the very beginning before the lights go out. Well, at the very beginning, then they do the first formation lap, and then before the lights go out, and then obviously if there's like an accident or some other kind of crazy thing on the track, they stop again, and then when they're in the pit. And so when they're in grid, the arrows or the slashes are vertical. There's no tilt to them whatsoever. And then from there, we have the things that indicate speed, which are the forward slashes. And so there's 2 degrees of leaning of the forward slash, one of them being speed velocity based on just like a normal part of the track. That's not when you can activate DRS. If anyone out there doesn't really know much about Formula One, DRS, it's a system that they trigger a flap on the back of the car that allows them to go much faster, but it's limited, it's controlled. You're not allowed to do it in the first couple laps of the race. You're not allowed to do it under certain circumstances, and you're only allowed to do it in certain parts of the track. But that's where a lot of the action happens. That's where people pass each other, and that's when you can get the fastest and the most speed out of the racetrack, the race car. So the forward slash with the more angle is kind of representing the DRS state. And then you have the curves, and in the curves of the track, you have some curves that are very slow, painfully slow. We call those chicanes. They're literally meant to just turn it into a very strategic, they can go almost I don't know, like 30 kilometers per hour, like very, very, very slow corners. And then you have some corners or turns that go very fast. And so you're still maintaining a speed of like 150 miles an hour, but like it's like a long gradual turn. So I represented both of those kinds of turns with the arrow, because in general, if you're even off track, if you're driving on a highway and you are about to approach a curve, you'll see these arrows that kind of indicate that you're turning. And so I think our minds are kind of like used to seeing these symbols in general as a way of kind of indicating speed or slow down. And I just try to represent all of that and shrink it down into the most minimal possible symbol that I could, because as the simpler the symbol, the more I was going to be able to successfully embroider the piece.
Amazing. Right, so you were also talking about different colors, and obviously there's other traits like color styles and border color styles. I've seen a lot of people from our Velocity Pass holders just like talking about these different traits and what they like the most. So what do these represent in the context of forward slash, but also how do they kind of convey back to your other collections, like from your squiggles, for example?
Well, the color styles go back. This goes back 25 years before I was even like tinkering too much with code for art. This goes back to my days in the ceramic tile world, where I was being asked to custom make mosaics for people using small little tiles. And there's something really interesting in that when you look at pixels on a screen, they're small enough that you can make it look like a perfect gradient no matter what. And that's what you see with the Chromie squiggle and with a lot of like gradations in the digital world. But as soon as you make a pixel 1 inch by 1 inch or even bigger, you have to trick the eye to make things as smooth as possible into what creating a gradient is. So with the Chromie squiggle, I was facing zero limitations in terms of how I could make a gradient. But with projects like / and, for example, with Heart and Craft, it went back to like the obtuse large pixel. And in this case, the obtuse pixel is a thread, which, while a thread is very, very thin, it's still limited by the fact that machines usually only have 15 colors to work with. So to be able to get a gradient out of 15 colors. In fact, some of them are border colors. So we actually only end up having 12 colors. In order to have a gradient with thread, you have to, here you can kind of see this picture, you have to essentially kind of intersperse the colors. But if you just do red, then orange, then you get more of like a rainbow effect. But so what you have to do is you have to go in and like in between every few red ones, there's an orange one and maybe even a light orange one, and then there's a whole bunch of red ones. And so that system, that kind of interpolation of color, is something that I had to do back in the day with the ceramic tiles, and then worked into Heart and Craft and was able to work into this. The math problem for me of generating variety from a simple symbol, if you think about the Chromie squiggle, again, the Heart and Craft, this project, and a couple other things that I've tinkered with, like my challenge and what I really enjoy is thinking through how can I make as much variety, obvious variety, because 2000 outputs doesn't seem like a lot compared to the Chromie squiggle, but it's still a ton of outputs. How can I make sure that when someone sees their output, they know it's theirs? So there has to be a decent amount of variation to where at least you spot yours and you're like, okay, that's mine. And that's easy when you have color. But when you have 2000 outputs, it gets pretty hard in that if it's only based on color, they're gonna start looking similar. And while the width of the slashes does vary between each output, so in some cases the slashes are all thin, they're all thick. AOI pointed out the elusive 3/3/, which is actually incredibly rare. In fact, I'm not sure that I thought it was even going to be possible. Because of the width and the potential of the slashes. Equally rare is going to be the one that has the most number of slashes. I haven't gone through the algorithm enough to find out, but there's going to be some that maybe have as many as 8. I think 7 is going to be a little bit more common. But yeah, trying to create as much variety and variation, and that's where I added, the border color. There's different border color styles. There's different interior color styles, and then the elusive hyper, which as Nick will probably also tell you later, is the most difficult thing to embroider in the entire world, because an embroidery machine likes to go around and kind of go up and down. And with the hyper, the embroidery is sorry that I'm doing this on camera, it might be kind of hard to understand, but essentially you're telling the embroidery machine to like stitch and then stop what it's doing and then stitch somewhere else, and it's a lot of work, and it doesn't like it. But the result, I think, it's pretty cool, because it kind of looks like a not chenille. It kind of looks like a terry cloth, or so. It kind of has like a fabric, like a cloth effect that's a little bit different than what you see with a typical embroidery. Again, the rarer they are, the more difficult they are to make. I didn't want to drive Nick too crazy with like these super rare ones that the super colorful ones that were going to be too difficult to embroider. So a little bit of my signature colors, kind of with the hyper, just making it be the one that's crazy with all the colors, and then thinking through all the different gradient types. One that I made the most common is where it goes from one color to another color, with the gradient kind of slowly progressing through the piece. And that's something, this is like a signature ceramic mosaic kind of gradation, where you essentially start, and so this stripe is 100% pink, this stripe is 100% blue, this stripe is probably 20% blue and 80% pink, 50-50, etc., and just kind of going across there, programming that to be applicable to various different number of slashes. So as it determines how many slashes, it then decides how it's going to distribute the colors amongst the slashes, and then writing those slashes into vectors, so that the embroidery machine knows which order make them. Because one of the things that's so interesting, I think, about dealing with embroidery that we had to really figure out is that if you just draw a bunch of SVG lines, then the embroidery machine is going to follow those lines in the direction that you made them. And so you actually not only have to kind of program the exact location of every stitch, but you also have to program the exact direction as vectors of every stitch. And once you do that, the embroidery machine will actually follow the path, instead of, like, if you look at my very original drawings, or not original drawings, but like especially the ones where, like, for example, I broke through the fabric because the needle got angry with me. The machine was stitching a line, and then it was lifting up, and then it was going back, and then stitching a line and lifting up and going back, stitching a line. And that's not a very effective way to embroider. It puts way too much stress on the fabric. So having to optimize, and I think there's software that optimizes for you. But I think what's really important to understand is my goal here is to eliminate the intervention of a person as much as possible in the design. And so, the way that the algorithm produced it is exactly the way that the embroidery machine eventually embroiders it without any human intervention. And the reason is because in embroidery, normally you get a graphic, and then that graphic is what's called digitized. It runs through some software, and some people have to make some decisions as to how the final piece is going to look. And while that's perfectly fine, A, it's not reasonable to ask someone to digitize 2,000 unique outputs. B, the digitizer isn't going to understand the process of the threads, which Nick's going to talk about in a little bit, so that you don't have to retool the machine, even though one hat is going to have all the colors and one hat's only going to have one color. The machine doesn't need retooling between all of those. So yeah, I mean, all of those things are kind of what came together to make this thing. And this project nearly killed me. This is, learning how to embroider and do it algorithmically within a short time period was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. But I'm very happy with the results, and I'm very excited to see where people kind of put their slashes beyond, the hat that they get as a result of the project.
And to also add on the interactivity of this project, apart from the embroidery part, is also the digital part where people can interact with their own NFT, right? Tell us a bit more about that. Why did you decide to add this feature?
Well, when I originally agreed to do this project, we were talking about 4 artists, 0.3 ETH, naively thinking that, oh yeah, this is like a normal thing you buy at the store where it's 0.3 ETH. And so therefore my part of it was 0.075 ETH. And so, it felt like just creating a really cool hat with a really neat concept of being able to take that embroidery file and just take it everywhere felt thrilling and exciting to me. And to me, the visual could have been left as just a very, very simple, minimal thing. As tends to happen within our ecosystem and things kind of get out of control, as the value of the velocity path started going up and as the hype kind of started building, I actually felt compelled to make the visual more interesting. I also wanted to make sure that I didn't go outside of my desire to keep it absolutely minimalist. In fact, in my original tweet on this project, I kind of said this is an uber minimalist thing. There's only so much you can do and keep it minimal without then taking it into like the 3D sphere, or as you guys saw, the incredible entries that happened with the Velocity Remix project, which if any of the people that entered were watching that, seeing those projects come through was like it was one of the most amazing things I've seen in such a long time. And it's if you look at each one of those and think, gosh, each one of those, obviously a lot of them weren't made algorithmically, but each one of those was such a powerful potential inspiration for making the visuals more I guess complex. But ultimately I wanted to keep it as simple as possible. The Chromie Squiggle is a very simple visual project. The Heart and Craft project is relatively simple as well. When it comes to all of the things that you can do with it, I think the number one thing that's really important to me is that when you index NFTs, you kind of need to make the NFT take up a decent amount of the screen. And so as a result of that, like the project, when you first open it and it first renders, like the slashes are really big on the screen. And that's just to make sure that the rendering that happens automatically is also really large on the screen, because otherwise you would be browsing a bunch of thumbnails with a really tiny piece at the bottom. But the piece is intended to be viewed when you press the L key on your keyboard. It's intended to be viewed in a way where it's very small at the bottom of a whole bunch of white space around it, further enhancing the kind of minimalist view of the piece. And while that's really hard for people to make happen within Twitter and what they're seeing on OpenSea is just like those big slashes, and of course that's what they're reposting, and that is the meat of the project. The intended view, at least from artistic perspective, is for it to kind of have a smaller piece within a larger larger space. And a lot of that, I mean, that's actually like a commentary towards just kind of how I call that lonely mode. And I think it's just how this like building in this ecosystem, especially during a bear market and like kind of when things are so crazy and rabid, and also like the world is on fire, and it just like it can feel pretty lonely, as crazy as that might sound. And it's really hard. And this to me, being what feels like a small little ant in a big canvas here, made me really want to like push that concept of like this lonely mode, or like this little tiny thing with a bigger canvas. And when you print it on paper, actually, for a friend of mine the other day that's been just like incredibly supportive, I actually took his mint and I embroidered it onto a big piece of fabric and put it into a canvas, into a frame, but like very small as an artwork, and it looked really beautiful, and it was in that right proportion. That's the way that it's intended to be viewed. And so but as I tend to do with any project, I like people to have some options as to how they view it. And so you can change the background color, you can change the outlines, you can change it into party mode, and then you can get rid of the noise. The noise is there because I do love this kind of like, if the idea of the project is to make you move forward, the noise gives you like a little bit of unsettling, like a little bit of anxiety. It's kind of like, okay, what's coming? And so that was the reason for the noise. But when you print it, you may just want the minimal lines. And I love just how simple the minimal lines look, especially when it's printed. It looks nice and crisp. So everybody has like all the options of how they can display it. Just like the Chromie squiggle, you can display it however you want within what's built into the algorithm. I think that's what's beautiful about algorithmic art, is that, as an artist, I don't want someone to just go do anything they want with my piece, but also I want to give some controlled, curated optionality of what people can do with my piece. And so I do build that into the artwork. Specifically, it's like saying, okay, well, I don't want to see this printed on like a red background. I mean, it would be okay. It wouldn't be the end of the world. I'm not going to be like, take that down. But like, I wouldn't want to see it printed. In fact, the Chromie squiggle has 10 different background colors. This one, I just wanted black and white. But it's really nice to be able to say, these are the ways that I want to see it displayed. As if you're going to show it as an artwork, if you're showing it to represent my artistic intent, these are the ways that I want to show it displayed. But you're welcome to pick within any of those, and I will sign off on that being like the artistic view of the piece. The finish line mode is something that it's just a very small little detail, but something that made me smile when I did it. I actually stumbled across it on accident. I was intending to do something else, and then it kind of started flashing, and I was like, okay, I really like that one. In generative art, and Per can probably speak to that as well, there's always like these like surprises, happy little accidents. That was definitely a happy little accident. Everything else was pretty intentional within the piece.
That's super, super interesting. And I would love to hear from Perk as well. What do you think about this project? I know you guys were speaking before, but I would love to hear your vision about this project.
Yeah. So I knew Erick was working on this, and there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. But I think the first time I saw it was a couple of days before, or around the time when you had the pre-mints. And the first thing I thought when I saw it was, this is Erick. That was very obvious for me. And I noticed the simplicity around it. And then I started digging into it. And it's kind of, that's also something with the Chromie squiggle. It kind of, you see it for the first time, you see the simplicity, and then you start learning about all the qualities that this artwork has. And it didn't take very many minutes until I kind of got the thing, and then I understood about the embroidery, which was for me just mind-blowing, because in other types of my work and Void, there's a lot of we have the ambition of taking the digital into the physical world, which is not something you see often. It tends to be the other way around. You take something physical, put it into the digital world. So when I learned that this was supposed to be embroidered, I was first of all thinking, that's an awesome idea. I love how you take the digital to the physical. But then from a technical standpoint, I was going, I don't know how the hell I would do something like that. So hearing about the technical difficulties is really interesting, and learning about, the the limitations on color, and thinking about needles breaking. I mean, it just blows my mind. So from an artistic standpoint, I think it's really Erick, and I really love the how well it connects to Formula One, because I saw the chicane type of arrows, and I just understood where that came from straight away. So yeah, I think overall it's kind of on point. It's also fun to see that some of the trait names, there's some similarity between pursuit and forward slashes, referencing chicane, and I think there were a couple of others references there. So it's fun to see how completely different answers we have to the question, what is speed in your world? So yeah, congrats, Erick. I'm really impressed.
That means a lot coming from you. Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Thank you, Perk. And Nick, I've been seeing you nodding while Perk was talking. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your collaboration with Erick and with this project? How did it go? How was the embroidery process? I know it was a lot of work, so we would love to know how it was for you.
Definitely. Well, first of all, it was extremely exciting because I am definitely personally a huge fan of the connection of the digital world to the physical. And I definitely believe that the world of collectibles overall and art could potentially change through the technologies that we all are building in this space. And especially with what Erick did here, I saw this from the very beginning as pushing the limitations that we know right now of the NFT world, of the blockchain technology, and of the embroidery itself. I believe, at least from my experience with the factories that I went to, it was like definitely pushing the limits of the technology. So I was extremely excited. It definitely was potentially the most difficult project I have ever delivered in my life. But I'm very proud to be a part of it. I don't believe anybody has definitely succeeded in something like this. I have spoken with factories all around Europe, essentially. Nobody have seen files like what Erick did. Everybody assumed multiple various wild assumptions, and then the factory which actually delivered understood what exactly Erick did. They were amazed. They said, like, definitely nobody else so far that they know of has tried something like that in terms of how the file was structured, how exactly he managed to minimize the setup of the machine. Because what happened is that we did set up the color swans and the needle swans, and unless something went wrong during the embroidery process, it was all set up from the first to the last one we embroidered. And we only had to do maintenance on the machine and changing any broken needles and things like that. All the colors and everything was preset, which from what I know is quite unique in the embroidery world. And also the fact that Erick managed in some pieces to utilize as close as 15 colors. Nobody in the embroidery world really does that. Most of the embroideries you will see on hats and t-shirts and so on usually are up to 6 colors. Yes, there are 15 color machines out there, but most of times they do not utilize all the 15 needles because the designers do not make as complex of designs to embroider, right? So I would say something that Erick mentioned initially, they kind of follow a pretty specific, I would say, a set of rules, and they embroider based on that because it's mostly logos and so on. So this was very, very unique. It was very hard to find somebody who would actually deliver it as I understood the assignment, let's say, and as Erick would be happy with it. And the aspect of working remotely on such a physical product is always very, very hard. But I'm very proud that we brought it to delivery, and I very much hope that it will be an inspiration for many artists out there, because also, like, the end result of the artwork itself, that what it gave me. A mentor of mine at some point of my life told me there is an essential difference between design and art. Design answers questions, and art creates them. And that's what I believe, in my case, Erick's work did here. It inspired so many other artists, first of all, to create all those alternatives, right? And that's the best it could do in my eyes. I'm very proud to be a part of it.
I have a question though. I'm curious about you guys. This is probably maybe a bit too technical, but you're mentioning 15 colors. Could you explain why you're talking about 15 colors? And I'm guessing that has to do with the limit of reels you can have on these or something like that.
So yeah,
And
definitely. Most of the embroidery machines at the moment have 6 to 9 needles, and there are some specific companies too, from what I know, which have made 15 and 17 needles machine nowadays. Most of embroidery factories use the smaller amounts of needles because A, it's much more cost effective. B, there is not that much know-how that you need to use a 6 needle machine. And C, the artworks, as we mentioned previously, which are actually end up being embroidered, are usually 1, 2, maybe 6 colors at maximum. They're very minimal and very simple. So the limitation here in our case was 15 needles, 15 colors. The colors were very carefully picked by Erick initially, and that was the smartest part of the project, in my point of view, that you had to put each color essentially on a palette to give it a better like digital understanding, I guess. You would create a palette of 15 colors, and then the machine would reuse that palette on all the layers of the file, right? So you wouldn't need every time to change the needles and the places of the colors on the machine. So yeah, essentially that was a limitation, but also something Erick managed to use in a very awesome manner.
To put it into perspective a little bit, like the machine we have here at home only has 1 needle. And so if this took me an hour or more to make, because I have to change the thread every time that it wants to do a different color. It takes not too long to change the thread. I've got pretty good at changing thread at this point with all this process. These machines have 15 needles and they have a color on each needle. The needles are ordered, and the machine, especially with specific kinds of embroidery files, the machine, it does not know what color it is using. It just knows what color number it is. And so you say, this is color number 1, this is color number 2, this is color number 3. So you set up the machine in advance to tell it that, and then what you're outputting is essentially an SVG. And so each layer of the SVG is a new color, a new needle on the machine. That's how it gets translated into the PES file. What's important here is that you want the border to sit on top of the infill. And so that has to be a whole different set of layers. And so, for example, there's 15 needles, but every one of the files I produced has 30 different layers in it, because I also wanted borders to be yellow and green and orange. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to have, you'd have to have some colors that were just for borders and some colors that were just for infill, and then it just wouldn't be as exciting. I really, some of my favorite outputs have like colorful borders on them. And where the retooling thing comes into play is if you think about the fact that those, you have to be able to, like, without telling it what color to use. It's unlike other machines where you can say, okay, now grab the red one and do it. You just have to tell it the color number. In any normal embroidery situation, if you had one output that was like, blue and red and yellow, let's say this is colors number 3, 7, and 9. You would essentially just have those 3 layers of those 3 colors, and you would tell the machine layer 1 is blue, layer 2 is purple, and layer 3 is red, and then it would just do what it needs to do. But then when you came in to do a different one, let's say, I'm trying to find a simple one here, one that, well, you come in to do like a more simple version, let's say something, well, that's not simple at all. Like this one. Well, no, that's the same colors. Anyways, if it uses 3 different colors,
maybe number 0.
How do you? Oh, number 0 in my head, maybe. How do you tell the machine to do those different colors? You would have to reassign the color needles to each color on the machine if there was only the 5 layers of the 5 colors that you used. So what we did is we created, every file has all 30 layers. It just has a ghost stitch for the colors. And what that does is it allows every color to exist on every file, so that you can walk up to the machine, regardless of what colors are used on the hat, and just stick the hat on the machine and press go, and it knows which colors to use and which colors not to use because the needles are in the correct order. And what that means from a cost parity perspective, which Nick will tell you, we're not quite at cost parity yet. I mean, it's quite a complex. It was quite complex, but I think once they kind of got into the rhythm of it, you know, it got a little bit better. But you can make 2,000 hats, 2 million hats. If you have that machine set up with the 15 threads in the same order, and all of the files coming in are using that same color order, you can make, like, you don't have to take any steps manually to reprogram the machine in between everyone. And that's something that you can't do. I mean, obviously ink on a printer, pixels on a screen, we can be very kind of controlling of how those things happen, but when it gets into embroidery, you can't. And maybe just to take it a step back, you know, a lot of what got us excited about embroidery, you know, we launched Art Blocks in 2020, and by March, people were already like, hey, I want a embroidered hat of a squiggle. Well, embroidering a squiggle is incredibly complicated. There's some squiggles that are very easy to embroider because you have just like one of my favorite squiggles is just all gray with like a yellow dot on the end. That one embroiders perfectly. But like, you know, there's a lot of different ways to apply logos and marks to apparel. You have dye sublimated printing, UV printing, flatbed printing. You have embroidery. And the thing is no matter how much we used all the other methods, the embroidered ones were always the one that were more coveted, to the point where people would make embroidered squiggles in ways that sometimes didn't even really look good in terms of like the way that they reproduce the colors, but like it was embroidered, and so it just gives it like a level of permanence that feels different than just like a UV printed piece, which I love the UV printed stuff too. And so that's where we realized, I mean, Mara worked with maybe 30 different embroidery companies to digitize squiggles and like figure out how to like place the threads in a way that they could make it a smoother gradient. I had always hoped to get an embroidery company to work with something kind of like with that level of gradation, but it just didn't really work. And so one of the things that I'm excited about now that I understand the embroidery process better is to hopefully be able to like create PES files, embroidery files of squiggles in a way that's a little bit smoother than some of the ways that we've seen them in the past. But that's what got us into understanding embroidery. And that's from the very beginning. I was like, well, shit, like next time I do a project, I want to make sure that my project, if people are going to want to embroider it onto a hat, I want to make sure that it's like compatible with embroidery machines instead of having to go through this digitization process, because Mara would go through the digitization process with one squiggle and it would take 2 weeks back and forth with a digitization company that would charge $100 to do a reasonably good job of digitization, not like a perfect job. So then what do you do with the other 9,999 squiggles? And so that's a lot of the impetus that kind of led for me to ask Art Blocks to build this infrastructure. It's like, well, what if we just build these things from scratch to use the code to control every stitch and eliminate that kind of digitization process and just be able to give everybody, as the owner of the mark, the ability to, like, for example, I was tinkering the other day, now I have my matching, gym bag that has my embroidered piece on it, and we can take that to so many different levels and different ways of adding the artwork. And is that crazy? I would have thought that was crazy like 5 years ago, like people wanting matching things. But if you go to any Art Blocks events, you'll see at least 50 custom embroidered squiggle hats that people took it upon themselves to go and embroider, and like they're proud to wear them. And so there's something there that makes people want to represent themselves in the physical world with their digital objects. And so why not make the digital object compatible with the physical world from scratch? And so that's a lot of the drive, and Nick made that happen. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
It's really impressive. I'm even more impressed now with hearing more about the backstory from the technical perspective. So yeah, again, congratulations.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and to add a little bit of my perspective on this, like, as I can see it after this whole journey of trying to actually embroider this, like, if you can make the embroidery happen, I don't believe there would be any issue with those same files to go to any UV printing or silk print or any other kind of aspect of it and implement it. So if you have that part covered, all the other ones are naturally falling in, right?
That's true. Yeah, we went for the hardest one. So yeah, everything else becomes easy. You can go get a t-shirt made with your piece. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and I absolutely love the way that this project has really brought people together. As Eric, you were saying, I think the goal was reached to really create a sort of community and movement behind this, not just like a micro brand in its own, but also to get people together. I was just thinking of what Perk was saying before about how people kind of matched their pursuit outputs to kind of create a track, right? So people have a tendency of wanting to be together and like find something that keeps them together and creates a community. So I think it was amazing. Like this whole project was incredible. I'm proud of everyone who made this happen. So yeah, that's amazing. That's really great. So one last thing that actually I wanted to touch on, which is along these lines, is the collaborative aspect of this project. So we have Nick here, and you were speaking about your collaboration with Mara, your wife. So how did that go with Mara? I know that she had some experience with embroidery before. And then also I wanted you to touch a little bit on the other collaboration that we did with the NFT cards, if that's okay.
Yeah. Well, so Mara had been just, Art Blocks has kind of changed our lives in a lot of different ways. And one of them, it has very much affected our family, and in some ways very positive. In some ways it's been like very complex. And Mara's been just a trooper through all of this. I mean, it's completely, derailed what any normal sense of life would be. And one of the things that she early on kind of took charge of is making sure, or trying to maintain a quality level of the things that use the squiggle or use my artwork. We are minimalists, and as minimalists, it's all about detail and about quality. And so she just got involved very early on with like anything. In fact, she handled Art Blocks merch directly. She kind of wore a lot of hats at Art Blocks early on. She did all the social media in the first year, and she did all the merch and all these, she's an architect. So she would get involved in any kind of like exhibition. She would get involved with like, planning out the space and drawing it out. That attention to detail, and then also having to figure out who I am, and because I think she's very patient with me and trying to understand how to work with me, because I'm all over the place and I'm overwhelmed. And so during that process, she bought an embroidery machine. She got really excited about it. It's a Brother single needle embroidery machine, and started tinkering with it. And that watching her tinker with it, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is totally accessible. And so she was able to kind of give me some very, very preliminary tips on how to work with a machine, which is, to me, as simple as it looks. To me, it is actually quite simple once you understand. I mean, just like I said, the process of embroidery has existed for decades, so it's actually quite straightforward. That doesn't mean it's simple to embroider. It's just the concept is simple. But to me, I was incredibly intimidated by the idea. It's like, sewing to me is just like this master craft that I just know nothing about. So she was instrumental in kind of helping make it happen, and everything from helping me pre-glue these like backings onto all the pieces, and just kind of, I don't know, she just kept me pushing forward. I don't know that I think it would have been easier to give up if it wasn't for her kind of like looking into it and just sharing basic knowledge about embroidery with me that she had learned. And then just, being a cheerleader in the end and getting excited about them when they started working out, because at the beginning they were pretty ugly. As you can see here, they were just kind of not exciting and not attractive, but she saw the vision, and so she was excited about it. And the other one that we were very lucky to work with is this organization called IYK, which these guys have become friends over the years. And they one of the reasons that I agreed to do this project was so that I could be able to have a conversation outside of our crypto space, not because I have anything, not because I don't want to talk to our crypto space. That's just where I am 24/7. And I feel like the single biggest problem that we can solve is to introduce more people to our technology in a way that's compelling and disarming. And so one of the things that I found important was that we were able to give away some of these pieces during the weekend, during the race, or during the week leading up to the race. But like giving someone an NFT, it's like, oh, now you got to download MetaMask and please put in your seed phrase and please do this. And it's just like, you're signing your life away. And like most of those people don't understand what they have or what this is, right? I mean, even I give this example. In 2018, I gave 2,000 interior designers in Houston, Texas, the ability to claim a Chromie squiggle before the real Chromie squiggle existed. And out of those 2,000 people, 14 people claimed it, right? I mean, it's pretty low rate. When the Chromie squiggle was released in 2020, they each were airdropped a Chromie squiggle. At that point, the Chromie squiggle was worth exactly what the mint price was, $20. So it just didn't feel like people having to sign their life away with like this 12 character seed phrase and like make sure to take care of it. Don't take a screenshot of it because it could get caught. Like there's just so many rules. And I think that the onboarding process is just so hard because you're essentially scaring people away. And so what was really important to me is that people could participate in this in a way that did not require them to have to figure out what all those steps were in order to start expressing their curiosity and going down the rabbit hole. We were at this beautiful event that Red Bull gave us a spot at, that there was a line of maybe 50 people waiting to hear about the hats and receive the hats because we were giving away the hats. And every single one of them, I asked, do you have NFTs? I think less than like 10% of them even like had collected or had a wallet. So my biggest, and I said this to AOI and Federica over and over, my biggest goal is to have conversations with people that don't know what this is about, to try to like educate them and get them excited about it. So if every one of those people that were in line, because we gave away a bunch of hats, had to sit there and download their wallet in order to get an NFT, it would have been really complex. Over the years, I've been working with this company called IYK, which is in charge of finding different ways of controlling the NFT itself. Everything from the collaborations with 9DCC, which is this wonderful brand created by my buddy G Money, where like the NFT lives with the shirt. So if somebody extracts the NFT, whoever has the shirt can always pull the NFT back. That's really interesting to me, I think, from a network perspective, but I want to make sure that people could actually own their NFT like outside of the hat, because if the hat was ever broken or lost or whatever, I don't want people to feel like they've also lost the NFT with it. And so what they've done is they created this really nice system where we were able to give the hats with like this hanging tag, and the tag was just very simple. You tap the card, and when you tap the card, it takes you to a screen, and that screen asks you for your Ethereum address, and then you can send the NFTs to that Ethereum address. And so you can do it at your own pace. I can't stress enough how important it is, in my opinion, and this I could be wrong, in order to encourage a broader consumer adoption, to let people do it at their own pace and do it when they find curiosity in it. And whether that curiosity is that they just casually look it up and they realize that the price is higher than they thought a hat would be worth, or whether that curiosity was because like their kids started talking about NFTs or their boss started giving away NFTs, whatever it might be, that process of onboarding needs to happen on your time. Otherwise, it's more likely that you're not going to be safe. And that's something that I told every single person I gave this hat to. I said, look, wallet security is the number one thing. Sometimes NFTs that I create have a tendency to go up in value. I don't know what that value is, but just please be careful. Like the worst thing is to find out that you lost your wallet or that you didn't take care of it. So please be very careful with your wallet. So IYK created this beautiful system, and they just make it to where people can claim these NFTs on their own time. I gave everybody a time limit. I said, look, you can't just like wait around for 5 years and hope this thing is still there for you. So, I told everybody you should claim it within 2 or 3 months. People, I think it just allowed people to like walk away with a hat, and maybe they liked the way the hat looked, hopefully. There's a whole digital optional, physical optional thesis that I've kind of been trying to like put out there into this world that says that, the broader consumer is going to become interested in what we're doing if it's optional to participate in either the digital or the physical. So if these hats existed at a store and you could just walk by the store and say, oh, that's a cool looking hat, I like that design, or, oh, I've heard of Snowfro, and so I'm curious what that is. That's how brands sell things. That's how people, artists, musicians sell things. They could just buy the hat. And if they wanted to take this tag and throw it away, they could, because they just wanted the hat. That's how 99% of our entire lives, that's how we've consumed, by saying, oh, I like that thing, I want that thing. Now, if they take that tag and throw it away, that's on them. Now, if they miss out on the airdrop, let's say that happens in 3 years, I don't know, something that happens, because that's what beautiful things about NFTs is, we now know who our consumers are, who our collectors are, so we can do fun stuff for them down the road. So if they miss out on that, they miss out on that. If they take that tag and they throw it in a drawer, and they're like, yeah, this is dumb, I don't care about NFTs, but like they kept it and they hold on to it, and then a year from now they're like, oh, wait a minute, let me go check on that again. And so they check on it and they kind of see what's going on. Maybe that's when they fall down the rabbit hole. Or like 1% of the people that I think will receive these types of things where they already know about NFTs, they'll immediately claim it into their vault and like move on. And the hat is just like a physical thing that represents the NFT. Either way, the IYK team has supported those things. They've supported some really awesome minting mechanics for the Heart and Craft project. And, you know, I just encourage people to consider working with them on anything that involves a physical good, because they have the whole spectrum from whether the digital lives with the physical forever, or whether it just allows you to claim it, or as they created with Heart and Craft, which is pretty cool, they created a system where you put in your ETH address and it actually triggers the mint to happen, and then the mint happens. Because I think what's one of my favorite things about this whole thing is this on-demand generative minting experience, where like you're watching this thing happen live. And so, you know, they've created a really nice infrastructure where you tap the card, you put in the ETH address, and it actually mints you a brand new mint. So you get to have that experience as well. So yeah, IYK, the team has been really wonderful and super responsive, and made this thing happen in a way that made me feel like we were able to talk to a new audience and let people participate. So yeah, very grateful for them.
Yeah, that was incredible. Like everyone who has collaborated on this project has worked super hard for the last 2-3 months to make this happen. So it's been very rewarding, especially I think the part where we got to speak with people, Red Bull Racing fans who were at the event. And as you said, like people who don't know much about the space, I think was very refreshing as a context to be in and be able to really talk to someone who's like, yeah, I don't know what an NFT is, for example. And then you really get to speak about it in a very different way. And I think you really reached the goal as well to merge the words of motor racing and motorsports with art, digital art. So it was incredible, and I'm so proud of everyone. So now we're kind of running out of time, so I would close the session for today. Erick, thank you so much for being with us, for creating this project, for taking the time, and congratulations again for this project. And Nick and Ferg, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts and your opinions. It was amazing to have you.
Thank you for having us. It was a joy to pick Erick's brain about this project, and Nick about the technical stuff at least.
Thank you so much for having us. It was an honor to be a part of this and to be able to push this whole side of physical goods, which I'm very excited personally about, a bit further down the line, I would say. Very excited. Very excited for what's to come.
Yeah,
I'd say a lot further down the line, Nick. Thank
you. Yeah.
I'd also like to thank you and the AOI team for kind of putting this Velocity series together. I'm so happy to be part of it, and so fun to see what the other artists have managed to create. I'm looking forward to the next drop now with Jack.
Oh,
yeah, super excited. Super excited about Jack's drop. Yeah, you put together a good team of people, Federica and AOI, and I really appreciate that. And I appreciate all the collectors that are getting excited about it, and you know, kind of digging into this project. And there's more than you see when you're on OpenSea. And I think, you know, one of the things about our ecosystem is how quick, you know, it's like we are like, you know, I said this in one of my announcements, like we at Artblocks, we render things to be backwards compatible with the rest of the ecosystem, because the art is meant to be viewed live, period. That is the artwork. That's kind of like saying that a sculpture that's a physical sculpture, like you are meant to appreciate everything about it by just looking at a photograph of it. And so I really encourage people to kind of dig into the algorithm, to open it live, to put it in the little lonely mode. When you put it on a screen, I have a couple screens in my house that I've kind of been testing what it looks like, and I'm really excited about it from that perspective, and I hope that people will enjoy that. And then the last thing is just please, we need to do maybe another masterclass just talking about embroidery, but would love to see people, especially if Nick and I can maybe put together a FAQ so that you can talk to your own embroidery people when you want to embroider on your backpack or your gym bag, so they don't tell you to like bug off, because they will. Like 7 people told Nick that this is just not going to work. So, you know, we need to kind of work with help put together a way to describe this so that it doesn't look intimidating. But I really want to see where people put this mark, and where people are excited to kind of show this. And you know, that'll take some time. But whenever, you know, I start seeing that, I just can't. That's my favorite part about going to events, is seeing people walk around with like squiggle related merch, or the iteration 2, or now it's wintertime, so we get to do the odd sweaters because it's been 100 degrees in Houston, so we can't wear these sweaters, but now we can wear these sweaters. So it's actually maybe one of my favorite parts of this entire experience, and so I can't wait to see everybody sporting their physicals of this piece as well.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'll speak to you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the AOI streams. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and subscribe to listen to more stories from the pioneers of the ecosystem.